My name is Dr. John Lenarcic, from the School of Accounting, Information Systems and Supply Chain at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. And uh, I'm doing a short presentation entitled Michel de Montaigne, Considered as an Identity Ecologist. And I'm doing this kind of semi-Socratic dialogue with my colleague, friend, and PhD student, Ilya Ananiev. Say hello, Ilya.
Hello,
Nice to meet
everyone.
you. USA. Thank you, Ilya. So let's get started. So I don't have much time. Michel de Montaigne, I hope I pronounced it correctly, was a French philosopher who lived during the 16th century, during the French Renaissance, noted for his innovative development of the essay as a literary form in his deliberations on the human condition. These compositions, which people still read today, his works are still in print. He elevated the mundane aspects of life in general through self-deprecating wisdom. Such diverse matters as the limitations of intellect, pompous notions of higher learning, impotence, and farting were all the subject of Montaigne's scrutiny. And at times his reflections appeared snide and sharply critical of the arrogance of the so-called clever people of his era. Montaigne would probably have been at home in the digital world today as a blogger of human foibles. Indeed, he may have even assembled an array of handwritten notes into his published essay collection using an antiquated method known as commonplacing, which is a process akin to analog blogging. And I'm sure that if Montaigne was around in today, in the 21st century, he would be probably an avid follower of Twitter, I guess, or maybe Instagram, because I think blogging is kind of almost out of fashion. But in a sense, what Montaigne was a person that observed things that happened around him, and he was kind of skeptical of things and critical as well. Right? And he didn't want to have the hypocrisy of intelligentsia of his era and just doing things in a kind of essentially boring way, creating philosophy. He wanted to incorporate aspects of actual life in his work. Right? And I think, um, uh, as I say in the title for this presentation, I consider him to be an identity ecologist, and I'm trying to unpack exactly what I mean by that. And what is identity? It's a fact of being who or what a person or a thing is. So the qualities, beliefs, personalities, looks, character of something defines the identity of something. And I think that's what Montaigne was doing in his essays. And the ecology aspect of it is that he kind of related all of these things to each other, because ecology, is actually a branch of biology that deals with relations of organisms to one another and to their physical surroundings. But it's also a metaphor that people use nowadays in the information age, where we talk about kind of relationships between entities, usually virtual. And I think what Montaigne was doing in his essays was kind of creating a constellation of aspects of identity. Um, and, uh, uh, and if you look at the term essay, for example, and essay uh, comes from an old French term, a word which actually means attempt or trial. So the the fact that Montaigne referred to what he actually wrote as essays meant that they almost weren't meant to be kind of the final or permanent thing. They were attempts or trials at something, which is, in a sense, is what happens, when people actually post something on a blog or on Twitter. It's not the final thing. It's something that's in a kind of transitional state, right? And then other people can kind of, retweet it or copy it or cut and paste images, right? And then it has, a life that is longer than maybe it should have. And I think that that is the interesting thing about Montaigne's, um, you know, work as a philosopher, because his philosophy was kind of you know, based on aphorisms or sayings, right? And also kind of blending casual anecdotes and autobiography with intellectual insight. You know, so imagine if, you know, people that when they posted a tweet or made a comment on a website, you know, in response to something, actually did it with some thought and not just kind of blurting something out and kind of just being snarky for the state of being snarky, you know, but actually, you know, saying something profound, you know. So what uh, Montaigne did was kind of interesting, kind of radical for uh, his era. And I think he influenced a lot of people. You know, people like even William Shakespeare may have been influenced by Montaigne. You know, the philosophers like, you know, Friedrich Nietzsche, certainly Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and so forth. You know. Uh, just to give you a few examples, right, of Montaigne, there's an essay title in his work called "How We Weep and Laugh at the Same Thing," you know, which is kind of an observational thing. And it's almost something that nowadays, in the 21st century, you might find, you know, like a stand-up comedian doing a riff about, you know, like Seinfeld, for example, you know. Because if you think about it, Seinfeld, the humor of Jerry Seinfeld, right, is observational comedy, right? Because what Seinfeld is actually doing is, you know, looking at things that are happening around him and kind of basically describing them and kind of, you know, pointing out the ridiculous things in what he sees. And that's why, you know, sometimes people often refer to the humor of Seinfeld as being, you know, the comedy about nothing. You know, his show was basically a show about nothing, but it was really about something. It was about life. You know, so I guess the humor of Seinfeld, in a sense, is almost like, you know, the philosophical insights of Michel de Montaigne, um, and Montaigne, well, I wasn't afraid to actually, you know, talk about things which, you know, people might nowadays in politically correct era find offensive, you know, pizza, shitting, farting, etc.
Can I jump in? It's
Sure.
so let's take Twitter for example.
Yeah.
If we're talking about ecology, identity, all that sort and we say, okay, Twitter, you put out tweets, you get affected by people in your environment. So in other words, people respond to your tweets, you know, they hate and like and all this sort of stuff. So how does that create, or how does that affect a character of the person tweeting when there is control in the background? So you cannot say this. You can't. There's no. How do you say this? There's not the ultimate freedom of speech. Someone's always controlling it. So does that actually, control your identity on the Twitter space?
Well, I mean, I think these things come in waves over history. I think, you know, so you have the periods in history when people have kind of freedom, where they can do things, right? And
Yeah.
perhaps they, you know, push the envelope too far, right? And then
Yeah.
people say, no, you can't do that. Well, let's put up rules and regulations and customs, right, to prevent people from doing that. And then when they put up these kind of social barriers, then that kind of affects other people in different ways and say, no, we must break down these social barriers, for example, because it's wrong. You know, people deserve to be free. So if you look at the history of humanity, you know, history is basically repeating itself. You know, so if we have a politically correct era now, it was reflected in the past. You know, like you know.
So, if we took Michel and brought him over here into the future, how do you think he would react?
Well, probably like, you know, for example, like last week, you know, we had a lot of interesting things happening on the planet. You know, but there was an episode of the British TV series 40 Towers, right? That
Yeah.
was actually banned, you know, or taken off the air in the UK, right, on the cable systems, right?
Yeah.
And the because of, you know, the fact that the content could have been offensive. You know, I think the episode title was "The Journalists," right? And just
Yeah.
the other day, the creator of, co-creator of Fawlty Towers, John Cleese, you know, called the people that took that episode off gutless. You know, they didn't have the courage to actually keep it on, right? It was actually meant to be offensive, right? To kind of make people think about what is the right way to act, because these people, this episode, are not acting the right way. You know what I mean? So, in other words, what John Cleese was doing was kind of making a comment about, that people should have, not be infantile in a sense, right? And kind of be able to decide what's right and wrong themselves, right? And not have somebody say, no, you can't watch this because it might make you.
So here's a question. So currently, people are trying to enforce the morals of today on the past, right? So I wonder what it would feel like if we took the morals of the past and applied them today. Wonder what would happen.
The morals of the past? You mean like the Roman Empire, for example?
Yeah.
The thing is, there.
So it's very easy to apply morals of today on historical events. Say, oh, we'll burn down bridges, take down all the statues, we'll change history forever. But what if we took a mirror effect and go the other way? And actually
the thing is, some people would argue, right, that we still do, follow the morals of the past. There's this thing called the Ten Commandments, for example. The Ten Commandments, last time I looked, were pretty old, And I think they're still like...
They have changed over time. The Ten Commandments haven't, but we've gone through the different versions of the Bible, the First Testament or whatever it was and so forth, and it's just evolved, so they changed it. But if we went right back to the original script, I wonder what would happen.
Well, the thing is, it's more like history is something that it is not kind of, without, it's something that, is open to interpretation, because I think there's no way of exactly knowing what the past was like. What we know is what we actually read from people who have interpreted it in certain ways, So, and I think often, things get forgotten, So there could have been other kinds of moralities in the past, right, which weren't actually recorded. We don't know about,
My point being is, the famous quote saying, history repeats itself, right? I think you said just a minute ago. But over time, people are trying to stop history repeating themselves. What would happen if we just let it go? Understand, it's a very complex question. Like, what would actually happen if we just didn't try to stop things happening? Try to change nature, try to control this, try to control it. What if we just let it happen?
So in other words, you kind of just run wild and run free.
And for myself, I see Michel as being one of these guys who just let it all happen, stop controlling everything.
Well, that's true. I think what Michel de Montaigne basically did is he just observed what was around and just recorded it as is. So it was like, well, okay, and then do suffer from impotence, for example. Why not actually say it instead of just not talking about it, because maybe if you talk about it, you can gain some kind of wisdom from that discussion. And sorry, I need to actually close with one aphorism from Michel de Montaigne, because I could probably spend many hours just going through the different sayings that Montaigne actually put in his volume essays, right? And this is the one that I like, and I think this is one translation of it. When I am playing with my cat, how do I know that she is not playing with me? And it's like, whoa, big deal. And it's more like, but that's just the thought that I'd like to leave you listeners with. And please contemplate that koan from Michel de Montaigne. Thank you for listening. Thanks, Ilya.